Input back to you, Dr. Ihab, and according to President Sisi, this summit, which is, of course, has other dimensions other than the economic forum, intends to build a kind of comprehensive framework for expanding Russian-African relations. How far do you think that would really be evident on the ground?
I think, first of all, that the model of foreign relations of the Russian Federation is completely distinct from the model of foreign relations of the Soviet Union. Mr. Putin particularly is not interested in slogans, is not interested in promoting an ideology like the Soviet Union. Mr. Putin is interested in mutual economic and political benefit. He is not willing to, I heard His Excellency Ambassador Badr saying that Russia is ready to help. I don't think that it is about help. It is about give and take. The Russians will invest if the investment is profitable for them. The Russians are, which is good.
Rather, Ambassador Badr termed this as a yes, win-win situation, but with no colonization.
I agree on these points.
Kind of hopes or dreams.
I agree with these terms, but he did say that Russia, at the beginning of his talk, that Russia is willing to help. I agree on all this, but I mean that Russia is not distributing any free lunches anymore. Russia is not going to.
Ever?
The Soviet Union was giving economic help in return of just political influence and ideological promotion of socialism, anti-imperialism. Russia is not interested in that. It's the capitalist market. And the model of developing China. The world capitalism has developed in a certain way that the multinationals are not interested in bringing raw material from Africa and then manufacturing them in Europe or America and then re-exporting them to Africa. Now the model is we are going to manufacture, we are going to build our factories in China or in Africa. You'll find big brands saying made in China, made in Vietnam, made in Bangladesh, because there is cheaper labor there, but it is also boosting the economy of these countries. So it's again a win-win situation. So I think that the classical view of Africa as a source of gold or coffee in Ethiopia, tea in Kenya, and so on and so forth, is going to be replaced by a place where you can share in the industrialization or even in high-tech projects like in Rwanda, like in communication technology, like maybe we will find a new Silicon Valley, like the Silicon Valley of India. We can find Silicon Valleys in Africa. So this is the hope. So therefore, Russia is going in with indeed some political interest, but the main locomotive of Russian policies, as you watch them in the last 20 years during Mr. Putin time, is the economic benefit of the Russian people itself.
When we speak about, also quoting the president here, when he spoke about the first kind, or the first of its kind to emerge as a summit, he also spoke about the timing of it as it comes in a period where major global and international transformations are taking place.
Yes.
So how far do you think this is a very timing for such a summit to take place, particularly between a huge power like Russia, a superpower, and the African continent, which is filled with developing countries, and some of them are really in good state to get into or to cope into the world?
Yeah, I think both on Of course, Egypt is co-hosting from the protocol side, because it happens that Mr. Sisi is the current president of the African Union, which is a post that changes periodically every year. But also there is strong relationships and friendship between the two strong leaders, as you may have it, Mr. Sisi and Mr. Putin, who have military and intelligence background and who can easily become on the same page. On the other hand, there is a wave of aspiration to modernity in Africa, starting from Sudan, with the revolution in Sudan and the changes there. Algeria still unsettled. The rising South Africa with its new regime, the rising Rwanda with its new regime. So there are lots of aspirations.
We're speaking about the contentious Libyan crisis, which
of course,
has to take...
there are crises in many nations. Libya, there is the struggle in Ethiopia, there are many struggles all over. But there is also hope. There is also aspiration of the African people. There is a wave of communication all over. Even in remote villages of Africa nowadays in 2019, you will see the internet, you'll see the Facebook, you will see people participating in Facebook from Botswana, from Lesotho, from places that you've never heard of, and communicating with people in America, in Europe, in England, in everywhere. So there is a wave of modernity moving out of Africa. And this wave, by its nature, will welcome plurality and multilateral relationships. So they will welcome Russia, they will welcome America, they will welcome China, which is a big player now. And as you mentioned, even Japan is not out of the scene. European Union is very strong. So all this with the fact that African nations are independent and are enjoying their sovereignty is a promising situation.
We'll speak about the bilateral summit which is to take place between the President and the Russian President ahead of the summit. Before we continue on with our discussion, let's first this quick report. And Russia-Africa summit to bring bilateral ties to new levels. Let's watch.
The first Russia-Africa Summit and Economic Forum is scheduled to be held in Russia's Black Sea resort city on Sochi starting on Wednesday. The summit, which will be chaired by Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, will discuss issues related to the modern international situation, current relations of Russia and African countries in political, trade and economic areas. Heads of more than 50 African states have been invited to the summit and trade forum. Before the leaders' meeting, Moscow hosts the Russia-African Economic Conference and the Russia-Africa Parliamentary Conference. At the summit, special attention will be paid to the current state and prospects of Russian relations with African countries and to the expansion of political, economic, technical and cultural cooperation. It is planned to discuss a wide range of issues on the international agenda, including joint response to new challenges and threats. At the end of the meeting, the participants are to adopt a political declaration on the key areas of Russian-African cooperation. The leaders of Russia and Egypt will also open an economic forum attended by Russian and African officials and representatives of major businesses. The panel session, A Safe Africa, will take place on the sidelines of the Russia-Africa Economic Forum. The event will be held as part of the thematic pillar collaborating in the humanitarian and social sector and will be devoted to security issues faced by African countries and their peoples.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Ihab. And we're speaking about a declaration by the presidential spokesman, Ambassador Bassem Radi, about the prospect of a meeting between President Sisi and the Russian president ahead of the summit. And what is the topics that we are expecting to be topping the agenda of their talks?
Of course, there is a long history of multiple or multidimensional relationships between Russia and Egypt. You have the whole issue of armament, you have the whole issue of the El Dab'a nuclear project, nuclear energy project, which is still pending. We have the whole issue of tourism. It seems that for many, many years, Russian tourists were the #1 population of tourists visiting Egypt. So I suspect all this will be covered in the declaration, or at least alluded to, if not directly explained or elaborated on. I expect also general terms about the importance of political stability, of the importance of avoiding the rise of terrorism. Mr. Putin is a very staunch opponent, is a very staunch resisting leader against all fundamentalist terrorism. So I expect that the issue of terrorism will come up high, the issue of economy, the issue of energy in Egypt and in Africa, all this will...
Let me take from where you ended here, and you spoke about President Putin as an opponent to extremism and terrorism and all this. How far do you think Russia and Africa together can cooperate to support multilateral actions that really works on ending threats like terrorism, like rising conflicts, for an instance, boosts an initiative Egypt has started, which is the silence of guns.
I think that the whole issue of global terrorism is not restricted or limited in one area of the world. You cannot separate terrorist fundamentalists in Chechnya from Boko Haram in Nigeria, from Daesh or ISIS in Syria and Iraq, from the jihadis and militants in Sinai. All of these people, you can find nationalities like from Nigeria participating in a terrorist act in France, or from Chechnya participating in a terrorist move in Iraq. So if we don't have a global coalition to cooperate, to exchange not only information, but also cultural strategies, but also soft power strategies, but also democratization, but also civil society and civil rights enhancement. To fight terrorism, we will not succeed.
Yes. All or everyone is speaking that this summit and economic forum is an event that will take the Russian-African relations to new levels or other levels.
Yeah.
To which extent are we expecting that, and why are we putting high hopes on such an important event?
The magnitude of the summit itself is noteworthy. You seldom have a nation inviting all the presidents of a continent as a whole to hold a conference on their resort city. Yani, Sochi is the equivalent of Sharm el-Sheikh, as you know.
Yes.
So they invited all the presidents of a continent. So this means they mean business. They must have something big in their mind in order to put such an investment, such an effort, in order to host an event of this magnitude. This in itself means something. That for Russia to invite all the African leaders in their country, and for all the African leaders to agree and accept this invitation, it means that there is something serious boiling.
When we speak about Russian-African cooperation, then we are speaking about huge prospects of economic ones. Yeah. And we're speaking definitely about the Russian existence here, for an instant, in, as you said, respectively, the Daba nuclear plant, and we're speaking about the Russian existence in the industrial zone here in Egypt. So what kind of economic cooperation, or what kind of mutual economic cooperation can exist between, we're speaking now about a continent at large, and a country as Russia?
Look, we have the economic, all the economic areas open to cooperation here. We have industry, the machinery, the car industry, the transportation industry, the telecom industry. All this, we have a huge experience in the Russian side, and a promising rising working force, more learned people coming out in African markets, resources, labor, all this are there. So industry is one area. Agriculture is another area. You can, we have to know that, we have to recognize that Russia is number one or number two in agriculture on the whole world. They are very experienced in mechanizing industry. So this is agriculture, I mean. And number three is the whole issue of tourism. There are promising touristic destinations. Now, Zanzibar, for example, is a very promising destination. South Africa has always been a destination. Apart, let alone Kenya and the safari, Uganda, Zimbabwe, all this are destinations. So, if the Russian tourists can come there, and on the other hand, the African are not that big now in sending tourists to other countries, but they are growing. So when he invites them to Sochi, which is a tourist destination, maybe there is also an implicit message that come and see the beauty of the Black Sea and our resorts in Sochi, and that they provide inexpensive destination for an enjoyable vacation. And number four, of course, is the whole financial and banking realm. This is also untapped, mostly untapped in sub-Saharan Africa, apart from South Africa itself. you have a whole area that is open to investment and development.
When you spoke about the beauty of Russia, so I think that we're speaking about two kinds of beauty that they are totally different. The beauty of Russia from one side and the West, and the beauty of the Black Continent.
Yeah.
And, yes, indeed. Russian ties with Africa has definitely declined with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, and there were other powers that emerged in the African continent. Particularly, we're speaking about the emerge of China, Europe, even the Middle East at some parts, and other countries. From your point of view, do you think that this summit would be a golden opportunity or chance to revive what was before the decline of the Soviet Union and the emergence of Russia again in this continent?
As I mentioned before, there is a paradigm shift. The Soviet Union had the paradigm of we need to promote socialism, we need to resist imperialism, we need to, therefore, and this was important for their own existence of their own regime in the Soviet Union. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the whole idea of world revolution, world socialist revolution, the Russian Federation sort of closed the doors on itself for a number of years, for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. Right now we are experiencing an awakening of the giant Russian bear, which is showing a healthy and a robust economy and ready to build a new sort of ties and relationships with all nations of the world without this ideological paradigm. We are talking now new and different age in Russian-African relationships.
Finally here, to which extent do we need another powerful player, especially when we are seeing a unipolar system emerging in the world? To which extent do we really need the rise of Russia? Of course, definitely with the United States and even Russia, China, I mean Europe, and the emergence of many polar instead of a unipolar system.
It is clear that Mr. Bush Sr. Promise of a new order with a unilateral mega power in the world is changing now. China is going to be soon is going to be the #1 economic force in the world. Now it became the #2 with Japan #3, quickly rising from nowhere. China has become #2. Yes. India is a rising economic power.
Definitely.
You have the European Union with a new inertia, with new power promised. So we have a multilateral world growing now. America is not going to be the only superpower in the world scene anymore.
Remains to be seen the outcome of this important summit and forum that it will be taking place for tomorrow and after tomorrow. Also this important encounter between the president and the Russian counterpart. Dr. Ihab Kharrat, political answer, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for your input.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Of course, we'll be updating you tomorrow and after tomorrow with all the coverages to such an important event. So until tomorrow, good night.